if your kid is saying, I don't like this, maybe it's because it's the wrong person, not because they don't need the help. It's important to listen and, especially if you're a kid listening, speak out. If you don't like your therapist for some reason, speak out. Say it, Mom, Dad, I'm not vibing with this person.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of our podcast. And today we're going to be talking with Alex, but we have a surprise for you because normally I kind of take the lead with asking some of the questions. And with this topic, it just made so much more sense to let Alex take the lead. So with that, I am going to turn it over to her.
Hi, so glad to be leading this topic. So I think when this topic came out, it was more of this week when we were having a conversation. And so for some reference, for some context here, I think we need to go back in a time machine. And we started talking about the whole diagnosis, the whole process. And, something that came out was that you felt a little bit of guilt around this whole subject. And I really thought that was interesting because at the beginning of the journey, I realized that we were going through the same thing, but we have two completely different reactions and two completely different feelings. So I really wanted to go more into depth with this and, really understand why we had such different reactions. And so I also wanted to start with, when I first got diagnosed, how did you feel when you first heard the word dyslexia?
So I remember vividly that being in the office of the neuropsychologist. And what I remember is her spending a lot of time with me rather than you. Just like, yes, I believe Alex is, I have to still confirm it because it was before she had written up the full report. But she said, why don't you come into the office? We were both seated. And she goes, based on some of the preliminary findings and what I am seeing, I believe it is my conclusion that you are dyslexic. And I just remember kind of this numbness coming over me, like, what? How is this possible? And you said in the opening how I had experienced guilt, and I think that is an understatement. I experienced huge amount. It was like this guilt just settled on my shoulders, and you're right. There are a lot of differences to receiving that diagnosis, I think, because you're the one with dyslexia. And then my role as a parent, in a way, came into question. And there's a certain amount of not being perfect that really starts coming into play and is part of the reason, I think, for all of this guilt, kind of behind it and so forth. And I just remember her spending a lot of time with me, even though you were right there in the room, and her like, so how do you feel about this? Are you okay? And I'm like, wow, I need some time to absorb this.
You know what? That makes me laugh because I remember when she was talking to me and she was like, how are you feeling? And I remember just saying, first of all, relief. I was like, oh, yeah, this makes total sense. But at the same time, I was like, but, nothing's going to change. Now that I have a label, I can see it. And, I can also say, hey, Mom, I was right. I knew it. And there was relief. Yep. But at the same time, I was like, okay, well, great. What can I do with that? What's next? And it was sort of just being a kid, being like, cool. Now, also, I think something that we always made jokes about that I think plays a role is also your personality. And that we always said that you were a tiger cub mom. Right. So what my sister and I said is that you weren't 100% on the level of tiger mom. So nowhere near perfect, but you were also nowhere close to a helicopter mom. But we sort of conjured this tiger cub mom because as long as the choices weren't going to harm us, you would sort of like let us fail in order to let us learn the lesson. But do you think that part of your personality could have led to any of the parental guilt of like not being perfect? Like, can you explain more about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, we kind of joke in the sense of, and I own the fact that I am extremely demanding. And so, like you said, not at the level of a tiger mom. And I think that for all of the viewers who don't understand that reference, it is a book that came out many years ago, maybe a decade at this point. I'd have to go back and look at it. And it was kind of the experience of a mom, a high achieving couple, and then the experience that she had with her child. And it was kind of from the perspective of the mother, and just great. For me, it was a great read. And so that coined this term, this tiger mom, just being very an individual with extremely high standards, to the point of causing anxiety in some children and so forth. So, yes, I think that part of that did contribute to the guilt that I felt at that moment, because the way that we would say is, your job is to be a student, right?
I remember
My
this very
job
well.
is to be a parent. And I felt at the moment when you received that diagnosis that, you know what, that I failed because I didn't really, number one, it wasn't recognize, it was understand and validate your issues. In my mind, it was Alex being Alex and what I perceived perhaps as a little bit lazy.
Yeah, no, I remember that very well. And so, sort of now reflecting on it, you've mentioned maybe not the exact terms, but parental guilt. But can you better explain what actually is parental guilt? Because, like, really, from my perspective, I just never understood why you felt guilty. I mean, for me, I was almost, thankful that I never got a diagnosis at a younger age because knowing my personality, I definitely would have used it as a crutch and I would not be as perseverant as I am today. But
Right. And I think part of it also is related to the severity of your dyslexia. Had it be if you were extremely or severely dyslexic, because again, it's on a continuum of a bell-shaped curve, then perhaps you wouldn't have been able to hide it as well, let's say, right? But going back to your question about parental guilt, of course, I looked it up because I sat there knowing that we were going to talk about this. And I'm like, so why did I feel guilty? Self-analysis is really big in my book. So I said, well, let me find out a definition and kind of what it means. And maybe that will help me be able to verbalize what I was feeling. And it's a reaction to doing an imperfect job with our children, right? And it's tied to loving our children, which of that there is no doubt, right? But it's the feeling that we've let our children down. And here's the key point. It's my issue much more than it's your issue. And that really is the key point with parental guilt, that it's accepting that we are not perfect. We as parents, as individuals, are not perfect. Kids don't come with a manual. The way that our family structure is nowadays, we don't have multiple generations helping us to say, well, like, here's what you need to do, hint, hint, hint. And a lot of, if when you were really young, or then there were so many calls to my sister. It was like, okay, they're doing this. What do I do? Because she had kids and they were 10 years older than you. So we were at different phases. And she really became kind of my go-to as far as what is normal and everything else. Then there was also the research, and it's like, well, there's got to be a book on this that I can read, to really understand what's going on and so forth, right? But that takes time, and that can take a lot of self analysis, shall we say, for that. Yeah, I think it really comes down to the acceptance that we are not perfect. And many times we will give grace to other people before we will give grace to ourselves. And that's something that I've really had to learn, that sometimes good enough, that 95% is really good enough for that. And so does that help explain it a little bit?
No, I think it definitely helps explain it, because until now, we've never really talked about why you felt guilty. And I just never understood it, being like, well, it's not your job, to look in the crystal ball and see the future. I mean, there are things that we can always miss, just because a kid falls down doesn't mean it was your fault for not watching them, that they fell. Kids are kids,
Right.
And I think I'm 100% to blame in a certain extent, that I was so focused on hiding my struggles that I wouldn't let anyone in, because I didn't want people to know that I was struggling, that I also hid it from you. And I did a really good job at it.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. You already gave quite a few suggestions to other parents. But a parent going through this journey right now too, and feeling a little bit guilty, do you have any suggestions for them that they can do to maybe feel a little bit less guilty?
Yeah, be kind to number one, be kind to yourself. I think there are a couple of things that it obviously can help to talk to someone. So whether that is a professional or even a best friend, someone that is non-judgmental and is just going to let you share your feelings. That a lot of time expressing the way that you're feeling, at the same time being willing to dig. And this is hard work. This is not easy, because number one, you're going to be revealing all the skeletons, that you managed to, just them back and bury deep within you. And to recognize, are there things in my own childhood that are causing the guilt, that are causing this reaction, or that maybe is even stronger than someone who doesn't have the same experience. So what is triggering to one person may not be triggering at all to another person. And really, honestly, as we're talking right now, kind of what comes to mind is as a child, I really tried to be perfect in that. My parents were divorced, and I was the oldest. Nana was in medical school when I was, like tween to teenage years and everything else. And so the less I didn't want to cause anything, problems, right, to Nana, because I felt as a kid that she had enough on her plate, so to speak, about it. So what I was just saying is, I'm sure that contributed to that need to be perfect. Then as a parent, wanting to be perfect, no longer a need. We went to want to Eventually, 10 years-ish later, recognizing that is impossible and forgiving myself. So talking to someone, perhaps seeking professional advice, journaling, it can really help just to express feelings, non-judgmental. Writing it exactly the way you're feeling just to get it out can be helpful. And researching, my big thing, find books on it that may help you understand what's causing these triggers, because that's really what it comes down to. It's my triggers are different from yours. And
yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you mentioned this next topic of getting some professional help and talking to someone, because that leads me to the next topic I wanted to discuss with you. And I remember, out of this whole guilt, and especially towards, the middle, towards the end with the whole battle with the school and everything, I personally ended up feeling really anxious, which led you to take me to go see a therapist in order to talk about how I was feeling and everything. Because definitely later in the process, I had some pent up emotions. And while I despised you in the moment for making me do it, now reflecting on it, I was like, wow, I definitely understand where you were coming from. And I wanted to ask you, what were some of the things that made you decide that I needed help? What were some of the red flags that you saw? Because I think that's really important for other parents to understand.
right. You were having a lot of meltdowns. And so
what?
exactly. Part of it was you were in a academically rigorous program, right? So there was a lot of stress on you for that. You came back, you had spent a year abroad. So you had been speaking Italian. So your English, you took a little bit to kind of get back in sync with the English. And probably for the first couple of months, that might have been contributing to some of the issues or what you were feeling for that. I wanted to make sure that what I was seeing, basically, if you were experiencing, I wanted to get you help. And I felt that it was really important that it not come from me. It needed to come from a third party. Partly because I felt that any advice that I could provide would be rejected as a parent. You wouldn't see it.
Absolutely. I mean, at the time, I was struggling with defiant daughter syndrome, DDS. So anything you said, I was like, absolutely not. You said red, no, blue. Up, mom, down. Are you kidding me? What? You think purple looks good on me? Black.
Right.
That was really just like what I was going through at the time. Which I think every teenage girl definitely goes through that. But I think I definitely did it in a little bit more of an extreme manner, especially since everything that I was going through.
Right. There was a reason that you were good in the musicals. You're very theatrical. And so I felt that, and in the 504, they said, well, we are seeing signs of anxiety. And so I wanted to make sure, given the fact that I had missed all of the red flags for dyslexia, that I wasn't missing red flags for serious anxiety. So I just said, that's it. We're going to find someone and then let's go up and kind of see. So those were the reasons behind, because I felt like, look, if there's nothing there, okay, we're done. But if there is something there, I don't want to be in a position where I miss those signs too. And to me, the consequences could be significant for that. And so I wasn't willing to take that risk. So we said, come on, we're going to go find someone. So I don't remember how I found the person. It was through a recommendation or something.
Right. And that leads me to the next part of this, is because while your intentions were there, something that I do want to highlight and mention, and I want to really advocate this, is that Something really important is that when you're looking for a therapist, like
Fit. It's called fit.
yes.
So why don't you talk about
So,
fit?
fit is something so important. And first of all, I just want to mention that there's nothing wrong about going to therapy. It can be such a good emotional outlet. And I'm really glad that today going to therapy is considered, or it's not considered, weird anymore as it was, with the connotations maybe 10 years ago. It definitely had, especially when you were a teenager. And maybe even nowadays, there still is a little bit of this that you're a teenager, you only go to therapy if you have problems. But like, that's not the case at all. But that also brings it to the finding the right therapist is really, really, really important. Because with my experience, I definitely did not have the right therapist. And I just remember, you know, sitting on this couch with this older lady, and she would just be asking me questions and I'd be answering it. And we really did not relate at all in any kind of manner. And she would ask me, oh, well, how's it going? And I would explain, well, I'm feeling a little bit anxious, but, I'm trying to work through it. And then she'd be like, why are you feeling anxious? Well, I just explained to you why. Like, it was just not a good fit. And because of that, I ended up despising therapy even more when it could have been such a good outlet for myself. And reflecting on it, I definitely think that as I got older, it was something that I learned that, not every therapist is right for you. You got to pick and choose. I like to think of it almost as like dating. It takes a moment to find the right person. or, and it's just something though that's really important is that making sure that your child or your kid is really bonding with the therapist. And that in my opinion is really, really important, because if they don't, then they won't speak, they won't actually say what's on their mind, and they will just shut down. Because I remember shutting down and throwing tantrums and saying, I don't want to do this and I want to go home and I don't see the point. And I think the fact that, because I also was really good at faking it till I make it. And I don't think the therapist saw that I was faking it at all, because at a certain point she said, well, I think you're perfectly fine. Why are you even here? And I was like, well, I agree with you. Thank you, ma'am. Bye. And I think that was definitely ding, ding, ding. Horrible. Right. So that was something that I learned throughout the whole process.
And I think that that's critical, because honestly, I didn't know any of that. Because otherwise we would have gone to a couple, had consultations in order to try to find a better fit. Maybe it was someone closer to your age that could relate to your experience. I mean, the whole series of reasons why behind it, and whether it, let's just say, if anxiety is on a spectrum, right, that validating what you're feeling is beyond normal. Like you're in a situation where you feel a little out of control. Okay. And so the fact that you are feeling out of control, whether that's full blown on anxiety or not, I can't say. That's not my area of expertise or anything else. But the fact that you are feeling out of control means that you need to learn some tactics, some strategies. How can you address it? Because life is life, and we are going to feel out of control many times. This is not something that just goes away. We need to learn to manage it in a way that works for us, and each person is different. So what are some of the questions? All right, let me turn it around for you. What are some of the questions that you think would be helpful to ask in interviewing a therapist or trying to find someone for therapy?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't think there's an actual interview process. I think you just need to go through it and sit down and do a therapy session and just see how you vibe and how you understand. And I think if your kid is saying, or, if your kid is saying, I don't like this, maybe it's because it's the wrong person, not because they don't need the help. And I think it's important to listen and, especially if you're a kid listening, speak out. If you don't like your therapist for some reason, speak out, say, Mom, Dad, I'm not vibing with this person, because it is so important that, you do relate, that you can feel comfortable to have the conversations on why you're feeling anxiety, and that you are, that they're able to give you the help that you need in order to deal with anxiety or whatever you're dealing with in the moment, or whatever crisis.
So let me ask this. I'm waving the magic wand, creating the perfect, let's say, therapist for you, right? Like, what would that person have looked like for you? I'm curious.
Oh, wow.
You didn't expect this one.
I didn't expect this one. Well, I definitely think someone a bit younger.
Okay, fair.
Someone that shares some of the same characteristics as myself, I think.
In what sense? Usually, outgoing, or
outgoing,
like what?
That they make me feel comfortable, making me like I can say whatever I want to and just feel like there's no judgment. It's total comfort, Honestly, someone like my gynecologist. They're so comfortable and easy, and I found an amazing one. I feel so I can talk about it. So I don't know, something like that.
Okay, all right, there you go. So I definitely I think with the age, it's really valid, and it's not a physical age, it's a mindset age, because guys, being able to relate and being a teenager today is very different from being a teenager 20 years ago and beyond, when I was a teenager. So yes, I can see with the age isn't so much a physical age, but more of a mindset. And also the fact that what you were experiencing related to the academics.
Yeah.
I think also played a role with it too, and someone that can go on.
No, I think something that's really important now, reflecting on it, is that when I said someone who was like me, I think in the sense that someone who valued academics to the certain level that I valued it, or at least understood my position, and maybe would have been able to introduce the idea of that just because you didn't do that well on exam isn't the end of the world. I had envisioned in my mind, and that's why I was experiencing so much anxiety. But I think that's what I really needed, or that's the therapist that would have, someone in that sense, sharing common, not even characteristics, but values.
Right. And it's hard to say, because whether that individual, I believe they had it, but at the same time you shut down, so you were never able to develop to get to the point, because there's a lot of schooling involved in that level, so you would you wouldn't achieve it if you didn't value it. But I understand completely, to help see a larger picture, in that you are it's part of a larger race, and it's just one small milestone, and how it's important to keep your eye on the goal so that you get there, rather than fixate on, oh, well, I stubbed my toe at mile marker 100 or something like that. Yes. Yep, for that. Excellent. Well, I think that this is fabulous. I think that I appreciate the therapy session for the parental guilt, because even now it revealed a lot. And I definitely will say that with the perspective of hindsight, I've been able to come to terms with some of the parental guilt. Is it completely gone away? No, but I definitely feel lighter. And part of that is because now, taking distance from the situation and seeing how it worked out for you, right? And then also how it opened up a new path for me, then it all worked out in the end. And there's something that is so magical in seeing that I find that when I'm teaching a student, a struggling reader, and they become proficient, and that magical moment when it clicks, that never would have happened if all of this hadn't happened. And that has allowed me, I think, to lighten my load for that. And a lot of self-analysis, absolutely. And reflection upon that I'm not perfect, and acceptance of that.
Well, I'm glad to hear.
Thank you. And I'm sure the listeners do appreciate the advice that you have for what to look for a therapist. And, therapy is not 10 years. This could be 6 months just to be able to talk to someone. And I think if you look at it in that sense, then it doesn't feel overwhelming for that. And I'm sure the listeners will appreciate that. So with that, I'm going to thank everyone. And I want to thank you for co-hosting this particular episode. And so until we see each other again, adieu.
Bye, Mom.